is a pleasure to be here with all of you today, and just really want to express deep gratitude to each of you for the ministry that you are all providing to this vulnerable community that we all serve. And so just with deep thanks for all of your ministry. And I'm excited to present a little about this model for prisoner reentry that we've been developing here for the last few years here in the Pacific Northwest. And we're excited about promoting the model as something that could potentially be picked up and used everywhere. And so our model, it developed, it kind of started back in 2017. And at the time I was working as a Catholic chaplain in a juvenile correctional facility here in King County in the Seattle area. And at that time, there was this huge spike in youth street violence. Back in 2017, we had that huge spike in kind of youth street violence, and it was fairly alarming. And so several members of the community that were involved in youth outreach and working with at-risk youth came together at kind of a roundtable, if you will, to talk about what's going on and what can we do. Well, so I went representing the Catholic chaplaincy in the Juvenile Detention Center to engage in that conversation. And two other individuals showed up at that roundtable that I had never met before. One was a Protestant chaplain that was working in jails in Skagit County and was working primarily with gang members and former gang members. And then his colleague, who was someone that was a former gang member that had been incarcerated and was now working alongside him as a fellow minister, doing kind of gang chaplaincy, if you will. They shared a statistic at that meeting that absolutely grabbed my attention in a really major way. And what they shared was that they basically said, you know, did you know that there's about the same number of prisoners in Washington State as there are churches, almost at a 1-to-1 ratio. So in other words, there is a church for every single individual incarcerated person in Washington State. Again, if you're looking through an ecumenical lens and talking about all the different denominations of churches, we had that many resources potentially available to returning citizens. That absolutely stopped me in my tracks. And I became insanely interested in what would it look like to mobilize parishes as resurrection communities, as communities of people that would enter into relationship with someone while they were in prison, and then would serve as a resurrection community, a wraparound community support upon that person's release. So the three of us connected after that meeting and kind of started dreaming a little bit. Well, that dream turned into a small nonprofit called Underground Ministries. That exists today. I'm a member of the founding board, and we developed a prisoner reentry model based on that idea, based on that statistic, that we now have some infrastructure, and we now have some materials, and we have some communities that are actively engaged in this model now. And it's our flagship program for the organization. And we call it One Parish, One Prisoner, or for short, we affectionately refer to it as OPOP. And again, it's based on that notion that we sort of realized that because we had so many churches, we didn't need to focus on, you know, building like a huge, massive reentry social service agency or something like that to do reentry well. Not that that's, we have things like that that are amazing that actually work with us. But what we recognized is the power in harnessing parish communities to serve as resurrection communities. So the model, as we created it, is our organization, Underground Ministries, matches a parish community with a single prison resident. And we make that match about a year or two, ideally 2 years, prior to the person's release. And the reason we do that is because we want that parish community to engage with their person and develop that relationship of trust, for a year or two prior to the person's release, so that when the person releases, they're releasing to the waiting embrace of an entire parish community that already knows them and is in relationship with them. It's mutual. And so it takes time to develop that trust, particularly with this population that because of their trauma and their backgrounds, trust is often a really, as you all know, an incredibly hard thing for them to engage in. Whereas in parish communities, oftentimes when they're working with this population, fear is what rules the roost, and parish communities are afraid, and so we're helping folks on the inside to trust, and we're helping folks on the outside to not be afraid. And when those two things can happen, the kingdom of heaven can burst into being in the present moment. But it takes time to get there. So we make that match. We ask parish communities to, like the 5 fingers of a hand, we ask them to select, 5 members of their parish community that sort of act as a stakeholder team or act as the 5 fingers of the hand, because the idea is not that these 5 members are doing a little side project on behalf of the parish off in the corner and the parish isn't aware of it, or it's just kind of like this little side project of this group. That's not the model. The model is that the whole entire parish community takes this on, and they identify 5 community members who are sort of the main actors in terms of engaging in the letter writing, engaging in the prison visits, engaging in developing that mutual relationship back and forth with the person, but on behalf of the whole parish, who's continually being updated about the progress of their person, who you're inviting the whole community to hold that person in prayer continually. As particular needs surface, those needs can be put out to the whole community, and then depending on who is, feels called to respond to the need, depending on what it is, different community members can engage at different times. So it's not meant to be side project of these 5 people, but 5 people acting on behalf of the whole. But that's what they do. Those 5 members, they go on a journey of informing themselves about kind of all the things you need to know about, engaging in prisoner reentry ministry. And they go on that journey together. And our organization provides the orientation materials and the formation modules for them to kind of do that slowly over time while they're engaging with their person. So those 5 stakeholders, they're writing letters back and forth, they're engaging in phone calls. In pre-COVID times, they were actually physically going and doing in-person visits. Now those are suspended due to COVID. And so oftentimes they're replacing those with video visits and things like that. But they're developing that relationship. The whole core of the model is based on mutuality, that this is not, a group of parishioners that are sailing in to save this poor, wretched person with the idea that because they have engaged in relationship with this person, that now this person is going to have this, super easy time when they reenter, that they're going to have this happily ever after. That's not the reality. The reality is these folks are pretty traumatized. They have a lot of habits and patterns, and when they get out, that doesn't magically go away just because they've been connected to this parish. And so the reality is that they are going to struggle. They are going to hit bumps. And so we expect that. We don't sail in thinking we're saviors or that everything's going to be smooth sailing, and we prepare our communities for it. This is about accompaniment wherever that journey goes. And about maintaining that open embrace of love and relationship, even if a person starts to veer, and that the community just is simply there waiting, inviting that person, to fall, to come back and that kind of thing. But going on that journey, but allowing the journey to go wherever it goes. The idea being that this is a mutual relationship of trust. So the parish community will be changed and transformed every bit as much, if not more so, than the person who is being changed and transformed by virtue of being connected to this parish community. It is mutual transformation. And that mutuality, that kinship that this program is based in, very similar to what Greg Boyle is doing down in LA, that is the bedrock of this whole model. Everybody is transformed. Everybody is challenged to become more loving, more sacrificial, more understanding, more trusting. The transformation is going back and forth dynamically. And so we invite our parish communities to get ready for that kind of change and that kind of inner transformation. As well as we invite our, incarcerated participants to prepare to be transformed by virtue of encountering a community that doesn't want anything from them, right? And that's what they're always on the lookout for. What do these people want from me? What are they trying to get from me? Do they want, do they want to feel like they're this noble, group of people because they're rescuing this poor wretched prisoner? Is that what they're getting from this? Or and so that's where some of those trust pieces come in. And when they realize that there is no agenda, that there is no agenda that we're converting someone necessarily to Christianity even, or trying to get them to be a member of the church, not even that is a part of this. Is entirely about accompaniment and a non-agenda relationship, and allowing them to experience God's love through that kind of a relationship that may be something very new and novel to them. And then helping us get out of our fix-it mode and all of our problematic things, and helping us let go of that. So that's essentially the model. And we talk about it with the Lazarus story, that we really use the resurrection of Lazarus as sort of the scriptural basis for this model, where Lazarus is dead and in the tomb, and Jesus weeps for the loss of his friend. And our incarcerated brothers and sisters are socially dead and entombed in the human garbage can that is the U.S. prison system. They are entombed. They are dead to society and out of view behind a huge heavy stone that is blocking the tomb. And Jesus weeps for the loss of his friend. And so what's interesting about that story is, so Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and we know that same reality is true for our incarcerated brothers and sisters, that they often are returned to themselves, that they come back to life while they're still in the tomb, while they're still in prison, that they are resurrected through that relationship with Jesus, that encounter that they have. But then Jesus instructs the community to roll away the stone. Lazarus is not expected to do that himself. Lazarus is resurrected from the dead, but it's the community's role to roll away the stone. That is the role of the parish community. We roll away the stone. In other words, we remove the barriers to reentry so that Lazarus, who is newly resurrected from the underground, can come out. So for us, the stone represents, all the legal financial obligations. Where is this person going to live? Who's going to hire this person with a record? All of the reentry obstacles that you are all so familiar with. That's the big giant stone that's keeping Lazarus locked in the tomb, locked in the underground. And yet the power of Jesus brings life to the dead and wants them to come out and rejoin the community. So we as a community, when the person comes out, the community helps to try and help the person address their LFOs, find, housing, find employers that will employ them, removing those obstacles, rolling away the stone. But the other reality is that the Lazarus story doesn't end there. Lazarus is entirely wrapped in his burial bands. And Jesus instructs the community to unbind him, to unwrap the burial bands from him. Now, for us, that symbolizes not the external barriers to reentry, but the internal barriers to reentry. Mental health, addiction, toxic anger, trauma, all of these internal battles that these folks have to fight in order to come back into the community, into the land of the living, to truly resurrect. And again, Jesus instructs the community to do that work. So how do we come alongside somebody and accompany them in that journey of loving their wounds, tending to their addictions if that's an issue, all that kind of work? How do we just a journey alongside in that effort as well? And in so doing, allowing the resurrection of this person to actually transpire, with the parish providing the resurrection community that allows this to happen, and it brings the gospel to life, not in a theoretical way, but in a right in front of your face. You are witnessing gospel resurrection and you're participating in it. We're not just hearing about it from the pulpit on Sundays, you are participating in the resurrection of God's holy people. And that's exciting to us. And so we developed our model, and we created a whole series of online learning modules. We created a meeting structure for those stakeholder teams so that once they put their teams together, they don't have to make up what they're going to do off the top of their head. They can follow a prescribed meeting structure, a provided formation structure to prepare the whole parish community for all the things they're going to need to learn about and engage in this work with their person, both before and after release. We provide all kinds of orientations. We provide consultations. We started with a pilot back in 2017 with 3 parishes, 1 Catholic, 1 Methodist, 1 Presbyterian. And we just tried it. And we told the 3 communities, like, hey, you're going to learn with us. Like, we're still figuring this out. But it was very successful. And I want to use that word carefully, because what I mean by successful might be different than what the average person describes as successful. We were successful in that mutual transformation occurred. We didn't always necessarily get the happily ever after ending that we all are sort of longing for, because we ran into all kinds of barriers and just the realities of, human issues, but mutual transformation occurred. So an example was our Catholic community was engaged with a former gang member who was at a nearby prison to the church and was going to be releasing to their community. They started their process of letter writing and visits, and then all of a sudden DOC transferred him 4 hours away to another prison 4 hours away from the community. And the community initially was like, well, we didn't sign up for that. Like, he's 4 hours away. That's a hardship. How are we going to visit him? And so we talked with the community about, how often is that reality happening for all of the loved ones of parishioners who, or of prisoners who want to visit their loved one, and DOC's transferred them away and now they're far away. I'm like, so what is the opportunity in that? So they were like, well, that's not we didn't see that one coming. That's unfortunate, but we're going to get in the car and we're going to drive 4 hours and we're going to meet with that person. This former gang member, his brain was exploding in his head because he could not understand, he couldn't fathom why a group of strangers would get in the car and drive 4 hours just to see him. So it was a hardship, yes, but it provided an opportunity for the community to express God's love in a way that this person had never experienced before. That was transformative for him and transformative for the community, because they committed to that sacrifice to show love at a God level. And then DOC transferred him across the state, completely to the other side of the state, a multi-hour drive. And the community was like, but they went. And again, the sacrifice on their part and the impact to him was unbelievable. And then nobody saw this coming, but then ICE put an ICE detainer on his case. So while the community he was just about to release, and the community was preparing to welcome him and to start engaging in the work of actual reentry, it was like, nope, sorry, he's not actually going to get released. They're going to transfer him to the immigration detention center, and he might get deported. And suddenly the community went on a different journey that was not on their radar. And so they had to pivot. They ended up finding an immigration attorney from their own parish ranks that represented him. He never would have had that otherwise. And they went on that journey with him. And even with the immigration attorney, they were not able to stop the deportation. And ultimately, this person was deported, and he never released to their community, and they never got to welcome him back. So was this a failure? Because it didn't go the way we thought? And I would argue no, because I went to the immigration detention center and I sat across from this person, right, just a few days before he was deported. And I sat before me a changed human being who had learned to trust again, who said to me, quote, "I have never been loved before than the way these people have loved me. I don't know what to do with that." His quote to me was, "Those people have no idea what they have done for me. I can trust again." The inner transformation that happened for him, even though it wasn't the happily ever after ending we all wanted, he went to Mexico a changed person. And the relationship continues. The church actually reached out to contacts they had in Mexico, and were able to connect him to some people that were connected to their church in Mexico. They still maintain, like text contact or, phone contact and things like that. And they're still connected, even though it didn't work out the way they all thought. This person was transformed. The community was transformed. I think also of a couple of our other churches where their person, when they went through the whole relationship, letter writing, visits back and forth, the person actually did release. And then a month after the release, the person disappeared, just disappeared, went off the grid. Nobody knew where he went. In other words, very likely that we call it sliding back into the underground, re-engaging in addiction or re-engaging in previous behaviors that got him in trouble. And typically when that happens, folks just disappear. And that happened in this case, and nobody knew where he was. And suddenly we had, senior members of the parish community literally got in their cars in small town Mount Vernon and were driving around the city looking for their lost loved one to see if he was somewhere in the community that they can find them. And when I heard this, I stopped for a minute and said, we've got, church ladies, senior ladies in a car searching their city for a lost gang member. If I was to imagine what the kingdom of God looks like on earth, it's senior church ladies driving around town searching for a lost gang member that they have come to love, that has become their beloved. So much so that his disappearance was heartbreaking to them, and that they would search the city for that beloved thing. That is the gospel. That is the gospel. That is the mutual transformation. The fact that these ladies even entered into this relationship to care about this former gang member to that point. There's the mutual transformation. There's the gospel. There's the kingdom of heaven coming into being. Another lady would tell us that, that having the gangs kind of hang out outside the supermarket, that was a common thing in her community. And she talked about going to the Safeway and seeing the group of gang members hanging out by the doors, and they frightened her. And so she talked about how she would walk all the way to the other door, even though it was out of her way, to avoid them because she was afraid of them. Pope John Paul II said, "Be not afraid, be not afraid. You cannot love if you are afraid." This same woman engaged in this one parish, one prisoner model, got matched with a former gang member, engaged in that mutual relationship of kinship back and forth. And by virtue of being in that relationship with just one gang member, she was transformed. She wasn't afraid anymore. She talked about the next time she went to the Safeway and that group of gang members was hanging out by the store, she would go up and say, "How are you? It is so good to see you. What are your names? It's nice to meet you." Kingdom of heaven on earth. We cannot love if we are afraid. We don't always get the happily ever after success story that the person never reoffended again or nothing went wrong. Sometimes that happens, and it's wonderful, and we all celebrate when it does, but sometimes things go wrong and our hearts get broken. So if we define success by whether or not the person, perfectly re-enters into society, then we're gonna run into problems. We define success around that inner transformation that's going on both sides. And the reality is, even our people, if they sort of slip back into the underground, if they disappear, that doesn't mean that the seeds planted by that community won't later grow. And that's the work of God. That's where I hear those, you leave the harvest to God, right? That's bigger than all of us. Our job is to engage in the relationship, in the presence, in the being the heart of God, embodying God that is accompanying these people no matter what, patiently waiting for them to return home to themselves, and always being the waiting embrace when they do. This is our model. So I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm excited to promote it, encourage other regions to consider it. And so what I'd like to do now is just show you our brief video, if you haven't had a chance to see it, and then we can open it up to your thoughts or questions, or how this kind of intersects with what you're doing in your regions. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and I hope this works. And let me know if you can hear it.
My name is Chris Hoke, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of Underground Ministries.
Can you hear?
For One Parish One Prisoner, we're now mobilizing faith communities across Northwest Washington to do exactly what we do, which is relationship.
I would invite churches to be a part of this program, not so they can do some kind of neat ministry where they'll get to bless others, but because it'll be transformative for them. They will look at people with different eyes. They will have their hearts expanded for folk who they used to judge. They will be able to walk in the world in a different way, with less fear, with more grace, with less judgment, with more hope. Our team had an orientation where we got to know a little bit about the program and what it might look like. We talked about the pattern of death and resurrection in the world and what that might look like for someone who has been incarcerated. And then we got to know our inmate, whose name is Wally.
I'm sitting in my prison cell and I'm just thinking, like, when I get out, what am I gonna do? Where am I gonna go? Where am I gonna live? What job am I gonna have? The last two times when I got out, I didn't have no support, no nothing, so I just go back to what I know. And if you have the support of a church that's connected with you and just for you, and supporting you and lifting you up and being there for you, that's awesome. You can't say no to that. What do you got to lose?
We got going with writing letters with Wally, and so we've built relationships over time. He knows our kids' names, we know his kids' names, he knows what's going on in our lives, we know what's going on in his, and it's become a relationship now. When we started writing letters, I just decided I would put it all out there. This is me. I've had a history of depression and suicide. I deal with anxiety and panic attacks. I don't always feel like I belong. And I'm working through stuff and I don't have any answers for you, but I'm here and I'm a good listener. It doesn't feel like he's our project. It feels like we're on a team with him. And it feels like it's something that we're doing together. And that's a really beautiful thing.
One Parish, One Prisoner program guides your OPOP team, 5 to 7 members of your congregation, through a 1 to 2 year journey of relationship, through prison letters, calls, visits, the whole time building trust, building friendships, and building a release plan together, where your team can accompany your releasing friend through their early months of reentry into the community together. All this follows our 24 monthly learning modules that covers everything from how do you write your first letter? How do you build trust? How do we share a mutual process of storytelling? Opening conversations about realities like mental health and addiction that affect us all. Even introducing some contemplative prayer exercises. Our modules also will walk your team through things that are maybe more foreign, such as legal financial debt and many of the barriers to reentry facing so many returning citizens. Your team can learn about this together, and we even walk you through how to involve your wider congregation for a deeper process of education, discipleship, and mobilization.
After being released from prison, I was already transitioning myself. So when I found out that there's a group of people with One Parish, One Prisoner that was going to be sponsoring my brother as a support group to give him opportunity to transition successfully, I was amazed. Honestly, I was very happy for him because I know how hard it is to transition on your own.
Sometimes at churches and in communities and in schools and all over the place, there's this sense that, there's so many of us, somebody will step up and do that. But when we have this concentrated team, we really have a sense of responsibility so that we're not going to leave him hanging. And then the rest of the congregation, whatever they want to do to help, great, fantastic, they can ebb and flow in. But for us and our team, it feels more like a structure of support that is more immovable. I think that the reason people were drawn to the One Parish, One Prisoner program was because it feels really hopeless and helpless when you see the number of incarcerated folk and when you see people coming out of prison and then bouncing right back in. And the idea that we might be able to intercept that and change that tide in some way, shape, or form, just being human with these people who've been incarcerated, thought of being a part of that was really compelling and exciting to people.
As we tell churches in our One Parish, One Prisoner program, this is not about changing what someone believes coming out of prison, but this is an opportunity to go deeper into and experience what we ourselves believe.
I was really nervous after almost 7 years in there locked up, not seeing the streets, being free. Knowing I had a release plan with these people, it was awesome because I know I could trust in them.
If every church did this, and they were open to supporting an inmate that's about to transition, it can change a lot in the community. It can start a ripple effect that can become a huge wave in society.
The goal isn't to get someone to come to your church when they come out of prison, but this is an opportunity for us to be the church to somebody and to roll away the stone, to practice resurrection, and to maybe experience and see the glory of God.
So I'm bringing up our
4 million.
Oh, sorry, I gotta.
That's what I think of as the mass tombs of our culture. And I think the only way we're going to empty the tombs of mass incarceration is if we have a whole new mass movement of relationships where people know their names and care for them and know them as friend.
Sorry about that. The Zoom tab was blocking my ability to to work on that. So I'm going to screen share one more time. And I'm just going to bring up for you the One Parish, One Prisoner website. I'll put the address in the chat in a minute here, but this is the webpage that on the Underground Ministries website that introduces One Parish, One Prisoner, talks about the model. There's some articles in here that you can take a look at. Last January, we were featured on the cover of U.S. Catholic Magazine, featuring this model. That article is in here as well. But then also, as you look through here, you can actually take a look at our learning modules that Chris talked about in the video, that your One Parish, One Prisoner team over the course of time would engage in these various learning modules on all these different aspects of reentry work that your community would need to engage in to prepare for this relationship and for this work of accompanying someone as they're returning to the community. So I'll send you this link, and then you'll be able to explore that on your own, look at some sample modules, explore more about the model. But we're excited about it, and we're up to about, we have about 15 parish communities now in the Pacific Northwest that are engaging in this model and are directly connected with their person and are in some stage of that mutual relationship development. And now we're going into our kind of third iteration of a pilot round. So we're inviting kind of a new cohort of folks on the inside to start applying for this. And we're starting to look for some new churches locally to do the match. So we're going into our third round of that pilot. We're excited about that. And we're excited to share this model broadly and to walk with other regions that are interested in exploring this. Catholic Charities in Kentucky, for example, approached us and said, we're interested in this model, would like to try it. And so they're piloting it, I believe, with 3 communities in the Kentucky area right now. And so it is something that can be where you can, use our stuff and have that infrastructure for how to put this in practice with parish communities in your region. So I'll stop there because I really want to hear from you. What are your questions about this? Or what are your experiences of engaging in reentry that relates to this? So I'll open it up to hear from you. Questions, thoughts, sharings?
Hi, Joe.
This
Thank
is
you for your
exciting.
presentation. It was excellent.
Unmute yourself. Good deal. Thank you, Gordon.
Okay, but I had really 2 questions. One was I think I heard at the end, and I wanted to know, how do prisoners sign up and how are they selected?
Great question. So we have a 2-pronged approach. Folks in prison do not self-refer. We have some relationships with some trusted groups that work on the inside. So for example, I supervise a series of Catholic chaplaincies, Catholic groups that meet on the inside with our chaplain and our volunteers. And so we will take referrals from that inside group with whom we have a trusted inside relationship with. We also have some relationships with some mentoring groups that DOC facilitates. And so leaders from that mentoring group that has relationships and has built some trust with some folks, they will send referrals to us to say, hey, we know this guy, we trust this guy, we think this person is, ready for this or able to engage in this. They'll send the referral. Then if we get the referral, we have a little I'll call it an application, but it's really like a reflection sheet that we will send to that referred person, presuming they indeed want to engage. They fill it out just to give us some initial information about what they're thinking about it and where they're at. And they send that to us. So all of our referrals come from those trusted inside groups. And so we kind of have people that we know that are vouching for someone. Then we take that we have a member of the DOC infrastructure who is actually part of our board of directors. She just does an initial kind of safety scan, if you will, just kind of looking at their information that they have, just to see if there's any red flags or any concerns that they might have, or just giving us information, just things that are good to be aware of. So we do a little bit of kind of that screening from the inside, and then between the inside referral and the quick DOC screen, then we feel reasonably comfortable that we have, a safe referral that we think is primed to engage, and that's how we make our selection.
Does the program work well with people who are incarcerated in a jail over a period of time, or is it best for prisons?
With this model, we have exclusively worked with prisons. And the reason being is folks in jail typically are in jail for a very short amount of time, generally speaking. And we really need the lead time for that mutual relationship to develop prior to release. Ideally 2 years, but a minimum of 1 year. Most folks, if they're in jail, they're either going to be popping out and not enough time for that that mutual development or that mutual relationship development to happen. So it would, or they're going to hop to DOC and then be there for however long. So we found it's best. This model works best with the prison population.
This is Bill. My camera's not working very well, so I've hid myself. But a quick question for you. In terms of getting started, could you give us a little bit of information on what has been the major concerns when you bring this up to parishes or churches? The major pushbacks that they have, and how do you overcome those pushbacks?
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes for a lot of people, it's the safety question. That is, is it safe for us to engage in a relationship with a person in prison and things like that? What we have leaned on in terms of answering that question, besides just kind of leaning on the teaching of the gospel that encouraged us to not be afraid, and but what we really lean on is the testimonies from our existing communities, who can sort of speak to that directly to other churches to say, here's why there's really no reason to be afraid, and here's our experience, and that tends to, when there's actual skin in the game and churches can connect with other churches and go, oh, okay, when people realize that, it's we're just engaging with people and that there really isn't anything to be afraid of. But having that kind of track record in other churches that they can talk with tends to waylay those fears. I'm trying to think of other questions that come up. That tends to be the biggest issue or concern or barrier that rises, but I also find that one is often not that hard to get parish communities to overcome. So in terms of first steps, we really just invite the community to select their 5 to 7 members of that stakeholder group, and to just start following that kind of prescribed model that we laid out, following the meeting structure, engaging in the formation modules, things like that. And then you just learn as you go, that you don't have to be the expert and have it all figured out to start. You just have to start and know that you have all the infrastructure and other churches and other people that are doing this that you can consult with along the way, and you learn as you go. And that seems to be comforting to folks, that they can engage without really, knowing everything you need to know right up front. You're going to learn as you go, and that's part of the journey. And that seems to help people feel reasonably comfortable starting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
We have a question regarding as far as how is liability insurance handled, and if you're meeting at a local church with returning citizens. And then I wanted to piggyback with that, a question as far as how do you contact, or how are you getting this message out to local churches? Is it through homilies or giving a presentation, or contacting the hierarchy of the church and finding the social ministry group or prison ministry group? Just how have you gone about making that contact? So insurance and contact.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of insurance, not that there's any special insurance that is needed to do this ministry. I mean, really, it is just, all of our parish communities, have their liability insurance for all kinds of things that is already in place. And so we simply utilize that. We also utilize the existing, every parish community has their own safe environment protocols and safe environment practices. All of those are applied to this as well, and applied to all of the volunteers that would engage in this, are comply with all of those things. So really, we just hang on to, our organization, our nonprofit organization has its own insurance policy, but then we really utilize the existing insurance policies that every church already carries for all kinds of things. But no special insurance is required for this. And in terms of how we find churches, a lot of times, part of it is some of the work of underground ministries is really just movement building. And so through social media outreach, through, Chris has written a book that we use to help share the story, trying to get the videos out there, things like that. Like, we try and kind of just get the word out about this movement that's growing. And then sometimes that attracts people to us to, see the video or saw something on social media or read Chris's book and is really interested in learning more. But really what we've been doing is we wait for the referrals to come in first, and we find out where that person is releasing to. And then we go into the community, sometimes cold, and we just find a church that's in the community where the person's releasing, and we have a conversation with the pastor or with the pastoral leadership and say, hey, this person's releasing to your community, whether your community does anything or not. But would you be interested in participating in this model with this person to, make that transition as amazing and as beneficial as possible? And so a lot of times when we approach churches with a specific person that's already going to be returning to their community, I have found that a lot of churches are like, yeah, we can do that. And that's what's exciting about the model, is with that statistic that started the whole thing, that in Washington, we have one church for every prisoner. It's a reasonable ask. So churches are engaged in all kinds of stuff. And, whenever you go to a church and say, hey, we want you to do more, it's always like, oh, but we're already doing so much. But because we have a church for every single person, technically, then we only have to ask a church to take on one person. And that's it. That's all they have to do their part to build the kingdom of God. And it's such a reasonable ask that a lot of churches are just like, yeah, we can do that. And then they sign up, and then they go on the journey from there. So a lot of times that's how we start with the recruitment, is just finding out where people are going to and then make the invitation.
What about the incurring the cost, Joe? As far as, the sidelines, people need medical care, as you mentioned, the attorney care. How has that been absorbed?
And we have a whole entire online formation module on money and how to engage with the money issue. So we're careful with money. So what's important about this model is that when Greg Boyle is actually one of our consultants for this model, and what he told us over and over and over again in his consultation meeting with us is that this model is about relationship. One Parish, One Prisoner is not about, in terms of what it's primarily about, it's not about being a resource provider, money, place to live, things like that. Those kind of tangible resources are definitely a part of the model, but they are always secondary to the purpose of this model, is relationship. And so we really encourage people to remember that this model is not about just providing stuff to people. We can provide stuff to people, including money, but that is always secondary. And those things can get shut off if the person starts to, screw around a little bit. So with money, we do encourage the community to consider, developing a fund with the parish community, maybe, that would help cover legal financial obligations, or if there are financial barriers that surface for the person, that the community maybe has a little fund that people are contributing to help with that. But again, whenever there's money or things like that, there's always boundaries around it, and that's all outlined in our money formation module. So the community can assist here and there as needed, but keeping in mind that is never the core purpose for the program, is to provide these kinds of tangible things. That's secondary. But people will get to that money module and then work through that as they go on the journey.
Joe, there's another question about, there is issues a lot of times in a lot of the states. If you are ministering to someone inside, you cannot have a relationship with them could you address that? You know where it's going.
Yes, and that is a great question, because we are absolutely running into that issue here in Washington. So that is the rule. So, and of course, who are the people that are attracted to this? But the people who are volunteering on the inside are the ones who are most interested in supporting on the outside. And then that barrier gets in the way. So for us, it's the red badge volunteers. Red badge volunteers out here are our folks who are volunteers in the prison. And yes, they have a barrier where they cannot engage in letter writing or all that sorts of thing. Now, we are currently in dialogue with DOC in Washington. They are aware that there's an issue with that rule and our program, and we're kind of haggling that out, but it hasn't been resolved yet. So what ends up happening is we just, to people who are red badge volunteers, we encourage them to be on the OPOP team, but their role is different. So they're not the ones who are doing the letter writing or the prison visits, or the other members of that team engage in the direct reentry. But that doesn't mean that they can't contribute to the OPOP team, addressing other behind the scenes needs, offering important insight just from what they have gained from working on the inside, to be able to help bring the rest of the community up to speed. All kinds of roles that they can play, even though there's that barrier. Once the person comes out, we have some procedural ways where they can kind of sign, where DOC can be made aware that they might be seeing that person on the outside. We have some ways around that once the person's out. But anyway, we do run into that barrier. We kind of hit our head against the wall because it is a problem. We're trying to work it out locally to see if we can find sort of a way to address that. But it's just an issue that you're just going to run into, and it's just kind of unfortunate. We do the best we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. One last question from just open your mic if you have it.
Adam, so regarding the issue about volunteering in the prison and working with the men when they're released, so if you were volunteering at prison A, could you work with someone that was released from prison B? So different facilities, a way to get around that rule?
I think there is some flexibility around that. It hasn't come up for us yet, so I haven't had the that direct encounter with that. I have what comes up. What's easier for us is I have volunteers who are volunteering in jails who are not barred from working with the prisoner, because it's two totally different systems. If it's prison A and prison B, I think sometimes the red badge kind of spans it, and so we can still run into that issue. But if I have folks that are doing jail stuff but then doing OPOP through the prison, that tends, because it's two different systems, we don't have the issue there.
Thank you, Joe, very much for this great presentation. It's, we as a church, we do so many great things, but they're done in silos. So one of the goals for CPMC is definitely to share models and let others know what's going on in different parts of the country. So we hope the East Coast is heard now from the West Coast, and we're open to hearing from the Midwest. But just as far as a quick reminder for everyone, our next town hall will be on February the 4th, and we will be following up with a conversation on racism and another presentation that will follow our last webinar we just had. We apologize that University of San Francisco blocked us. We did not know it from not allowing we had up to 500 people that were allowed onto the webinar, and we had 300 signed up. And unfortunately, they blocked us at 100 because of so many students on Zoom these days. So please do, if you were not able to be part of that webinar, go onto our website, and it's there with the materials, the pre-materials and the webinar. Also, we'll continue that conversation on February the 4th. Also, our next webinar, which is another crucial topic for all of us that are in ministry to research and be part of, and that's ministering to trauma, and is being trauma informed in our ministry. And we minister to people that have been traumatized and are being traumatized. And so this will be Father Reagan Shriver will be giving us a presentation on our next reentry town hall. And that will be on February the 18th. So we appreciate all of the gift of all of your time here, and of us growing together as a community and also growing in our ministry. So thank you so much, Joe. We appreciate you, and we appreciate all the ministries that are represented on this call today. So we look forward to seeing you again, and thank you for all that you do on a daily basis.